welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new around here, then my name is Katie. I'm a full-time sketchbook artist, and today I'm going to be sharing different ideas and ways to fill your sketchbook. Sometimes we get a little bit stumped for what to draw, so I hope this video is helpful. But before I get into the video, I do just want to share a really big announcement, and that is that I have written my first book. So this book is all about sketchbooking. It's called Sketchbook Joy, and that really encapsulates what I try and do here on this channel as well. So if you like my videos, I have no doubt that you'll like my book too. It's all about how to fill a sketchbook. It's got loads of creative tips and prompts as well as inspiration. There's step-by-step projects in there as well, so you can see exactly how I lay things down in a really manageable way. There are also chapters full of mixed media techniques, so I share how to use different things as well as showing different ways you can layer them together. And it's just a book that I've really poured my heart and soul into this year, and I'm incredibly proud of it. So the book is out next March in 2025, but pre-orders are live now, so I will leave a link in the description. Pre-orders are really helpful to show the companies that people are interested in this topic and that this is a book that people want to buy, so they really make a difference, and like I said, I will leave a link in the description. But if you've already pre-ordered, then a huge thank you from me. It really does mean a lot, and I'm really proud of this book, and I can't wait to share it with you. So we'll be sharing a bit more behind the scenes, and I'll be doing a Q&A on Patreon this month about how it's come about. But I'll also be sharing some things on Instagram and YouTube in the run-up to the publication next March. So I have filmed one of these before, so if you need even more prompts and ideas, then I will leave a link up here. But sometimes we open our sketchbook and we are stumped for what to draw. Sometimes we just need that little push, or basically it just helps to be told what to do. So I hope this helps. Whether it's just to kickstart your creativity, so you might take my subject or my medium and run with that. So use that as your jumping off point and then create your own spread. Or you can follow it completely and copy exactly what I do and the tips that I'm giving you to create in your sketchbook, and that's totally fine too. As long as you're creating and putting in those marks in your sketchbook, whether it's for 5 minutes or 5 hours, it really doesn't matter as long as you're being creative and finding that sketchbook joy. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and let's get on with idea number 1. So my first prompt is to create a collective spread. So this means just taking one subject. So here I'm doing magpies. You can do it with other birds. I've done it a lot with chickens. I've also done it with parrots. You can also do fish. You can use so many different things, but the idea for this one is to create a spread which just has lots of these on a page. It's a really nice way to fill a spread because it comes together quite quickly. You can work on them individually, or you can take a colour and work on them all together. So obviously with this one I could have taken the black and put that down for all of the birds and then come in with the blue and then come in with the pink. Or you can do it one by one. So I've done this with butterflies as well and mushrooms, which you're going to see coming up next. But it's just a really fun way to create. So obviously with the mushrooms they were all different colours, so I did work on them individually. But when I've done chickens in the past, then I did all of their shapes first, and then I went on with the other colours and added their details last. But whichever way you choose to work, I do love filling my spreads like this. If I don't know what to draw, it's a really easy way to just pick a random subject. You could use a reference book as well, or you could find different ones online from somewhere like Pexels and just get lots of different types. But it's a really nice way to easily fill a spread because they do come together quite quickly. I was using gouache here, but you could use dry mediums, and I also love labelling everything up so it all comes together as if it's a field guide, and it really brings the whole spread together. The next idea is an age-old idea. You'll probably do it at school, but it's to do master studies or to copy an existing painting. So what I'm doing here is actually a painting by Albert Thon. This was in a Hans Christian Andersen book, and I was really studying it to try and get the different colours. So it was quite a limited palette, and one of the great things about doing master studies is that you really learn things as you create. Obviously we all have our own little ways of doing things and our own styles, but by really copying what they're doing and trying to get their composition or their colours, it's amazing what you can pick up. So even though it's a direct copy, you keep that in your sketchbook and then you can apply anything that you've learned into your own work. It's a really lovely way to create without having to do all of that legwork that you do as an artist to create your own piece, because it's been done for you, and it's amazing what you can learn. So I've also done this with Van Gogh, and you'll see in a minute that I'm going to be doing something with Cézanne, and I've copied a lot of his works before. But you can create using artists that you absolutely love, or you could pick someone who creates something completely different and you haven't thought of before. because maybe their style doesn't appeal to you, but you can still use something from their work. So it could just be the colours that they're using, or maybe they're more influenced by line work. There are loads of different things you can take from a person's work, and I think master studies are a great way to explore that. So like I said, I also love Cézanne, but this prompt is to paint in a master's style. So instead of copying one of their works directly, you can actually just take one for inspiration. So what I'm doing here is a still life, which Cézanne loved a still life, but I'm doing my desk view. So I have a whole video about this on my channel because I was working with the tape when I created this, if you want to see the full process. But I really love this because it really forced me to use more line in my work, which is something I don't often do, and also to make it feel a bit more unfinished and use lots of scrubby brush marks. There was so much texture in Cézanne's work, so I absolutely loved painting like this, and I definitely need to make more time for master studies and just doing something in another style. We so often are trying to find our own style, but I think we can take and learn a lot by trying someone else's too. There could be one tiny thing that you might pick up that you want to apply into your own work. Next up, we've got heading outside for urban sketching. So I love doing a bit of sketching outside, so doing plein air work, but I've really enjoyed this past year or so doing some urban sketching and heading to different cities. So these little clips are from my Vienna vlog, and I went to Vienna for a little solo art retreat, and I loved that. It was really out of my comfort zone to be doing so much urban sketching, but it was really fun too, and I was using a lot of brush pens and drawing out and about. Luckily it was good weather, but I just think that creating in person makes you see different things. You have the challenges of finding somewhere to sit, which obviously changes your viewpoint. You have the challenges of taking art supplies with you and even the weather, which could change. But these are all good things, and I think they do make us better artists if we have things that make things a bit less easy. So I really enjoyed creating these ones, and obviously this was in Vienna, but you don't have to go abroad or go somewhere new. You can do it in your own hometown. It might be nice to be able to see it through a different lens perhaps, and create artwork inspired by where you live. And then another one which you might be familiar with on my channel is plein air working, which just means going outside. It's the French term for painting outside, and here I am in Japan, so this was on my honeymoon, but it could be somewhere more local. Although I do love travel sketchbooking, that's a whole other idea entirely. But I think just going outside to create, as I mentioned just now, it does create different challenges and it forces you to use different supplies. And I found that my style really changes when I create outside compared to in the studio. And I think that's a really fun thing to notice, because I might want to work on that more to try and blend them together and really understand why it changes. It really forces me to think differently, and I also find that it brings a bit more of a freshness to my work. I love looking back on spreads that I did create outside. It gives me more of a connection, and I remember things better when I've drawn them in situ. So if you haven't ever tried plein air working, then I definitely recommend giving it a go. It's not too scary, I promise. You can just find a little quiet spot and create just for you for just 5 or 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be a really big grand plan. So my next idea is actually to go on a virtual road trip. So in the last video I created, where I was showing some prompts for you to create in your sketchbook, I talked about using Google Maps for art, and this is the same sort of thing, but turning it into more of a project. So this is something I did during my daily art challenge, and I did a virtual road trip. So I picked California and I did a road trip along the coast, and I used Google Maps to drop my pin and just find different views as if I was actually there at the time and following along the road. So I literally was the Google streetcar. I just dragged my map around and then found places that I wanted to draw, and it was such a fun project. It was quite interactive because I was sharing on stories at the time, and just a really nice way to explore. So doing it that way, you do find different references. They're not all really curated like they are on some stock imagery sites. By using the Google Maps and by moving along, it creates a really fun project that you can work on over a few weeks, or even just fill one sketchbook based on that. And it's a really fun idea, so you can do it on lots of different road trips, or over on Patreon this month we're doing a world tour. So I'm using some of my patrons' images and learning more about where they live to create this travel sketchbook project. But it's really fun, and it's way cheaper than travelling, obviously. But I definitely recommend it, especially because you can really make it unique to you. Next up is to change your scale. So for me that was scaling up and painting big. Again, this is something I would like to do more of. This was in my old studio where I had a little bit more room, but I really enjoy changing my brushes. You can see I'm using a house paint brush here, but it really changes your marks. And I think it's a really nice thing to do to play with your style and again, play with different mediums. I was using some acrylic paint here, and I also mixed it in with a big tub of white house paint that I also used to paint the walls. So it's relatively cheap. I do find that acrylic paint is a cheaper medium anyway, but it's just really nice to play with those marks. And you don't have to use big brushes. You can see here I'm using a smaller one, but just by painting on a really big piece of paper and also sticking it on the wall made me be a bit more careful with my marks. Just by having it on the wall and also by having this much space, it does change the way that I work. You have to use bigger marks to fill the space, or you have to spend a lot more time on it if you kept your marks the same. So it definitely changes the way that you work. Another option is to add collage. So I often use collage when I'm not sure about adding something, and for this one I did test it out beforehand, and obviously I'm gluing it on here, but it gives you more options, and I think it's a really fun way to apply mixed media and also make your pieces a bit more tactile. So here's another one where again I'm painting big. I've got that pink base layer which I love using. I definitely recommend that as well if you haven't tried it before, of putting a pink base layer behind your landscapes. I've had a few questions before on why I put a colour down first if I'm just going to cover it up, but I do find it influences the final piece. It gives a little bit more of a warmth and a bit of a richness, so you can also do orange backgrounds or yellow, and it changes the atmosphere of your painting because it will still peek through and it affects the colours that you put on top. But I definitely recommend changing your scale. If you do work big as it is, maybe go smaller and try and do something a little bit more detailed and smaller in your sketchbook, which means your marks are different. I'm still adding on some smaller marks, so it definitely doesn't mean you have to change it completely. This was still kind of in my comfort zone with some of these smaller elements I'm adding on last, but it definitely felt different, and I couldn't be as detailed or as neat because I still wanted to work quite quickly, so having time limits definitely helped me here, and you can change the parameters depending on what makes you feel good. And I think it's just a really fun exercise, so definitely one I recommend trying out. Okay, next up is changing your brush and your technique. So if you've seen any other videos on my channel, you'll know I generally use round brushes. But for this one, I've used a flat brush. And I do have quite a lot of different brushes, but I rarely use just one flat brush, which is what I'm using in this one. And I'm changing my technique because I'm using lots of smaller, sharper strokes. I'm really trying to be very careful about where I'm putting down my marks. And if you've seen a lot of my work, you'll know it's very much not like this. It's very scrubby. I'm trying to get lots of texture and smushing my paintbrush on the page. So this one was a very different change of pace for me. You can see I'm really trying to apply the green carefully and using those brush strokes to create the movement in the piece. So this was a study of some orange roses, and I really like the way it turned out. It was definitely fun to do, but like I said, it is different, and I think changing things up and trying different things is a really nice way to work out what we like. We might be able to take something from this to add into our style, or we might work out that we don't like it at all, but we won't know if we don't try it. And I do think it's really fun in art to try new things. So that one was definitely a bit of a different style for me, but like I said, it doesn't matter if it's in your sketchbook or if you're doing these little separate experiments on paper. It's okay to try new things. Nobody has to see them, so even if these prompts don't create beautiful artwork that you're really proud of, it still is a good thing to have in your arsenal. It's always good to practice, and it could even come into play further down the line with your style. And my final prompt is to create some nature studies. So this can be done with loads of different mediums. This is more about the subject, but I think it could be really fun to do as the seasons change. You might live in a place where the seasons don't change that much, so it could be something you could do in your sketchbook using online references. But for me, I really love being able to change my colour palette based on the time of year. So that could be another way. You don't necessarily have to do it from live. You could maybe add in or swap in some colours from your usual ones just to change it depending on the time of year it is. So here you can see I'm painting in my sketchbook and just doing some studies of some autumnal berries and autumnal leaves because I was so enamoured by all of the colours. And I do notice that I use a lot more blues and whites when it comes into winter. Spring, I use a lot of greens and yellows, and then summer, I think I use a lot more pinks and oranges. But it is quite subtle, and I think it's a really fun one to notice. So I would like to do some more of these seasonal sketchbook spreads as we do change seasons and really start to notice. So maybe I will start making notes, but I think this is just a fun prompt to do no matter what time of year, but really focus on the colours and maybe swap out your colour palette too. So a big thank you for watching. I hope these prompts have given you a kickstart with creativity if you needed some ideas, and a really big thank you to my patrons who allow me to create these videos here on this channel. But as I said, we are doing a travel sketchbook world tour project this month, which is going to be really fun as part of my 3-year anniversary over on Patreon. But thank you for watching. I hope you have a creative week, and I will see you next Sunday in my new YouTube video. See you later.